ini loh mak, anak apa dari Aulia gitu.
Two decades after the Indian Ocean quake and tsunami, the most devastating natural disaster in modern history, scientists are warning of the next big quake.
Kita lihat sampai ufuk jauh di sana, maka itu adalah potensi ancaman megatrust Mentawai yang memiliki potensi ancaman 8,9.
We don't want people to forget the lessons of 2004. We want them to remember that they should be prepared.
Are we ready for the next big one?
Unfortunately, I should say that I'm really worried about the preparedness of Indonesia in facing another disaster event.
We rarely talk about the disaster unless when the disaster happened, right? So it's too bad.
Pasaman, Indonesia, a regency in West Sumatra famous for its natural beauty and culture. Kartini lives here in a traditional abode called a rumah gadang, meaning big house.
Lebih kurang mungkin 300 tahun ya lah. Tapi awak dari keturunan dari umat baru dapat dia awak kemari. Kini disuruh awak tinggal siku. Lantaran lain nang kemuni le. Orang yang ujuang namo tadi di belakang, lain orang yang tengah namo. Tadi ko bili ya tiang tamu. Oh, sopan panjang ada dari atas sampai ke bawah, nilai sambung. Nilai pakai paku, pakai pasak ni. 5 tiang ke, ninduk nan sambung, ninduk bersambung.
Kartini remembers the day her house shook 20 years ago. On the 26th of December 2004, a magnitude 9.15 quake struck the west coast of Sumatra. It's now known as the Indian Ocean quake and tsunami, the deadliest tsunami in history. In the neighboring province of Aceh, the quake and subsequent tsunami devastated the area. Kartini's house, however, withstood the quake. It would also survive seismic shocks in the following years, including a 6.2 magnitude quake that hit Pasaman in 2022.
Tadi pertama kami duduk-duduk modeko lah pas di jonjangko. Terasulah goyang-goyang buat baru. Jadi kami takut-takut seorang. Tiba goyang kedua, kami langsung turun. Kita lihat rumah lah bergeser tiang. Itu kebetulan nampaknya bergeser dari batu. Habis kami dilobuh sekampung lah. Togak siku, nolain di rumah le. Sampai kami malam di jonjang seorang ni le.
11 people were killed and more than 400 injured in the February 2020 Pasaman quake. Hundreds of buildings, including houses, schools, hospitals and clinics, as well as mosques, were damaged. All 6 rumah gadang in Kartini's village survived the quake, as well as 50 traditional wooden houses.
Elok rumah awak lah punya untuk pakai paku, pakai pasaknya. Kalau rumah pakai paku, pakai simen lah orang. Antu runtuh Allah Taala.
In the 2004 quake and after, poor construction materials and methods were blamed for the collapse of buildings and bridges. Traditional houses like Kartini's have been studied to see how they have withstood these earth-shaking events, to potentially design earthquake-proof buildings.
Kita lihat rumah gadang itu strukturnya bukan seperti struktur bangunan beton ya. Dia tidak kaku. Dia justru lebih fleksibel dan lebih lama dengan gaya horizontal dan vertikal. Kenapa? Sistem bangunannya itu dengan sistem kayu yang dipasak. Dia tidak dikunci, tidak dipaku gitu. Ini kalau terjadi goyangan dia akan mengikuti arah goyangan tadi. Nah, inilah yang membantu kebertahanan rumah gadang tadi.
There are many things that we can learn from these traditions. For example, the local materials that are used to build settlements. Now, I think there are lots and lots of potentials that haven't been explored in incorporating all these local traditions.
There is some urgency in looking for ways to mitigate earthquakes. Seismic events are common in West Sumatra. An 8.5 magnitude quake was first recorded in Sumatra in 1797. And in just the past 10 years, over 800 quakes with a magnitude of 4 or above have struck within 300 kilometers off the coast of West Sumatra.
Jadi gempa itu kan akumulasi energi ya, karena ada stres atau patahan. Jadi itu kan ada pergerakan di inti bumi. Itu kan seperti panas kita merebus air. Akhirnya dia menggerakkan lempeng di atasnya. Jadi lempeng di atas itu saling bergerak. Jadi ada yang saling bertumbukan, ada yang saling menjauh. Kalau yang saling bertumbukan itu kan timbul di daerah subduksi. Jadi pergerakan inilah yang menyebabkan akumulasi energi. Jadi energi itu terus terkunci, Pak. Lama-lama ini batuan tidak bisa menahan, patah gitu, Pak. Ini patah inilah yang menyebabkan gempa bumi. Gempa bumi itu dahsyat sekali, bisa energinya. Kalau bom atom itu hanya nuklir atau bom atom itu hanya lokal gitu ya, itu energinya bisa 100 atau 1000 kali dari bom nuklir Pak, energinya yang di pusatnya itu ya.
Indonesia is in a precarious position. It sits on a major fault line where two tectonic plates meet, known as the Sunda Megathrust. The Sunda Megathrust runs 5,500 kilometers long. It begins from Myanmar to the southwestern side of West Sumatra province and passes the islands of Mentawai. The megathrust underneath the islands is commonly known as Mentawai Siberut. The Sunda megathrust continues to the south of Java and Bali before terminating near Australia. Megathrusts cause the largest earthquakes. The Indian Ocean quake and tsunami of 2004 was a megathrust quake.
So what we say with megathrust is the earthquake occurred in the subducted plate boundary, which more than probably 8.5 magnitude. So very big earthquake. So that's megathrust. Thrust is the type of the releasing energy, vertical releasing energy that can create the tsunami.
So now, 2 decades after the Indian Ocean quake and tsunami, scientists are warning of the next big one. In August, the Meteorology, Climatology and Geophysics Agency reminded the public about the risks, saying another major quake could happen at any time. The same month, the Ministry of Social Affairs sent a team to Mentawai to map out areas that are potentially vulnerable to megathrust earthquakes.
Nah, saat ini kita berada di Pantai Tiram, di mana Pantai Tiram ini berhadapan langsung dengan Mentawai Megathrust. Posisinya di sebelah barat saya, di mana kalau kita lihat sampai ufuk jauh di sana, maka itu adalah potensi ancaman Megathrust Mentawai yang memiliki potensi ancaman 8,9, ya, magnitudo gempa bumi 8,9 yang nanti akan menghasilkan mengenerate tsunami yang berpotensi di pesisir Sumatera Barat mencapai 10 sampai 18 meter dengan golden time sekitar 20 sampai 30 menit.
And the fact that it's been so long since this patch has last had an earthquake rupture, Padang and the Mento and Siberut and Sapura, having gone 200 years since the last earthquake and tsunami, are at there's a slightly higher chance that it might happen there than somewhere else.
With it being a question not of if, but when, is Indonesia ready for the next megaquake? Risa Aulia Sofyan was 16 years old when he lost his parents and 3 siblings in the quake and tsunami that hit Aceh 2 decades ago. An older sister and 2 brothers survived, along with these much cherished photo albums.
Ini ibu dan ini ayah. Yang ini pas yang lengkapnya, foto pas acara abang nomor 2 pesta, pas sebelum tsunami, sekitar 4 bulanan sebelum tsunami lah acara ini. Ini saya.
Now married with 2 daughters, Aulia lives in a house built for survivors of the tsunami. 20 years on, it's still painful to talk about the tragedy.
Ini loh mak, anak dari Aulia gitu, yang kan ibaratnya kayak kita anak yang punya kakeknya, punya nenek gitu kan. Kangen, sangat kangen. Kan Aulia tidak menemukan jenazah, jadi ibaratnya kayak hilang. Kalau seandainya harapan, kalau misal oleh selalu berasa ini statusnya itu kan masih hilang. Beranggapan kalau tiba-tiba mereka pulang hadir kayaknya.
20 years ago, Aulia was at his grandmother's house when the quake struck. Feeling the tremors, he immediately rushed home. At first, all seemed well.
Karena ayah kan baru sembuh dari sakit stroke, jadi baru bisa jalan pelan-pelan. Jadi oleh tanya gimana ayah, aman nggak? Alhamdulillah aman. Alhamdulillah ayah masih sempat megangin TV tuh biar nggak jatuh katanya. Karena pas di depan ayah kan TV-nya, jadi sempat biar nggak jatuh.
But half an hour later, all hell broke loose.
Ada yang lari sambil teriakin air laut naik, air laut naik. Kami juga masih bingung kan, maksudnya air laut naik itu apa? Air pasang atau air banjir biasa atau gimana lah. Jadi nggak ada bayangan air tsunami itu sebesar itu dan sedahsyat itu.
Aulia's father was too weak to walk. His mother refused to leave him.
Nggak usah, biar mama temenin ayah di sini. Kamu sama adik-adik lari aja.
The epicenter of the quake was on the seafloor, some 250 kilometers off the coast of Sumatra. The force caused ripples in the ocean water, creating waves which became a tsunami. Waves as high as 50 meters struck Aceh.
Nah, posisi pas Aulia lihat air segini nih. Nih pas. Lihat air di sini. Airnya tuh pas di belakang rumah ini emang tinggi. Nah, di sini Aulia udah pasrah.
The Indian Ocean quake and tsunami had energy equivalent to 2,200 atomic bombs dropped in Hiroshima. The length of the rupture was similar in length to California, causing the seabed to rise by 10 meters. The devastation spread to the coastlines of Thailand and of India and Sri Lanka, as tsunami waves travelled across the Indian Ocean at about 800 kilometers per hour.
Ada ruko ini kan, nggak bisa lari lagi, udah mentok. Lagi di sini nih, ini ada kanopi yang ada kayunya kan. Jatuh ke kayu 57 di atas kepala. Duduk gini. Begitu duduk, langsung kesapu sama air. Kegulung 3 kali gulungan, yang terakhir dapat sofa, naik ke rumah ini, rumah yang selamat ini.
From the moment the quake occurred, it took about 15 to 20 minutes before the tsunami made landfall. Had people evacuated immediately after the first tremor, more lives could have been saved. But at the time, there was no tsunami warning system in place. In fact, many did not know what a tsunami was.
It's the wake-up call. After 2004, we initiated the development of the Indonesian tsunami warning, and we got support from various countries.
Dibantu dengan negara donor, kita banyak memasang sensor seismograf sampai akhirnya di 2008 kita bisa launch, kita punya sistem peringatan dini tsunami tahun 2008 nanti kita sudah punya sistem peringatan dini tsunami, kita bisa memberikan informasi ke masyarakat itu dalam waktu 5 menit kita bisa memberikan.
This is the control room at the Meteorological, Climatological and Geophysical Agency, known as BMKG. It's manned round the clock, and they monitor, among many things, seismic activity. The agency has 10 regional offices across Indonesia.
Jadi ini 2 menit yang lalu ada gempa 3,9 itu di Sulawesi. Ini epicenternya di sini. Kekuatannya 3,9, kedalaman 10 kilo. Nanti dari sini kita punya hasil. Kalau misalkan nanti ini gempanya karena kecil, langsung kita kirim ke sistem desiminasi, Pak. Desiminasi nanti langsung dikirim ke masyarakat.
Since 2019, the agency has used computer modeling to forecast tsunami formation. It helps them determine what evacuation responses are needed.
Jadi ini adalah hasil simulasi tsunami terhadap gempa magnitudo 8,0 kedalaman 5 kilo di barat Simelu ya. Jadi kita di barat Simelu ini ada gempa 8,0. Jika ada gempa 8,0 kedalaman 5 kilo terjadi di Simelu, maka tsunami yang statusnya lebih dari 3 meter akan terjadi di daerah Simelu ini, Pak, yang merah ini.
But there are questions around the reliability of these warning systems. In 2018, a 6-meter-high tsunami hit Palu in Sulawesi. But before the waves hit, silence. The tsunami warning systems did not activate. Residents say no siren sounded. As it turns out, the early detection buoys had been inoperable for 6 years due to lack of maintenance.
The fishermen go to the ocean and then see something floating and they drop the anchor there and start to do the fishing, and it's damaging the sensors, the communication equipment, and etc. And we had a job that say we have 28 buoys, but it lost 30.
Out of the 170 earthquake sensors that were installed after the Indian Ocean tsunami and earthquake, only 70 was well maintained because that's the amount of funding that they had to maintain. So it was one thing to actually establish the system, but the system has to be maintained, which unfortunately Indonesia didn't really have a good track record in it.
Additionally, there was a woeful lack of tsunami sirens on land. Indonesia needs an estimated 1,000 sirens. At the time of the Palu quake in 2018, only 56 were installed. In the aftermath, President Jokowi called to improve warning systems and education.
If we establish a tsunami warning system, that was growing from 20 years ago, how well is it functioning now? That is the most important question. So yeah, unfortunately, I should say that I'm really worried about the preparedness of Indonesia in facing another disaster event.
2 decades after the tsunami, Banda Aceh is a bustling city. But reminders of the tragedy are visible, such as this mass grave, the Aceh Tsunami Museum, and the former floating diesel power plant barge, which was washed around 6 kilometers inland. It's now a monument.
Searah menjauh dari laut.
Tauku Ahmad Fuad Haikal is a senior member of the forum LSM Aceh, a community rights NGO. Today, he's educating children on what to do during a tsunami.
Korban di Aceh karena itu. Kita nggak tahu yang namanya golden time itu, waktu-waktu emas. Jadi rentangnya itu antara 10 sampai 15 menit. Antara gempa dengan datangnya air laut itu punya rentang waktu antara 10 sampai 15 menit.
During the Indian Ocean quake and tsunami, Haikal's wife and daughter were swept away by the waves and never found. He managed to evacuate his son to Jakarta, but he later died of injuries.
Sebagai masyarakat yang pernah mengalami bencana yang sebelumnya kita nggak pernah bayangkan, seharusnya kita harus banyak belajar dan itu harus difasilitasi oleh negara. Dalam konteks upaya-upaya peringatan dini seperti early warning system atau alarm peringatan dini tsunami yang pernah dipasang di seputaran pesisir-pesisir di Aceh, menurut saya ini harus tetap terus dijaga, harus tetap terus dirawat, di-maintain. Janganlah kita harus jadi kecolongan lagi.
As for Aulia, after surviving the 2004 quake, he and his surviving siblings spent a few months in shelters before eventually moving to permanent houses built by the government. Today, his house stands on the site where his parents once stood. But should the next big one hit, his house may not be able to withstand it.
Nah, boleh kita lihat yang retak-retak di kamar. Ini salah satunya yang retak itu dinding dan tiang rumahnya itu udah nggak menyatu. Gempa ada sering. Kalau gempa itu sering, cuma ke skalanya nggak terlalu kencang gitu kan. Cuma gempa-gempa kecil yang bikin retak-retak lagi rumah. Retak. Kalau pindah belum ada rencana, karena juga dari segi ekonomi juga semuanya kan mahal kan. Mau bikin rumah sulit kali kayaknya, masih jauh dari inilah.
To shore up its preparedness for the next big one, what can Indonesia learn from other quake-prone countries?
Kalau di Jepang, anak-anak kecil pun mereka sudah tahu ketika ada bencana mereka harus ngapain.
In August 2024, Japan's meteorological agency issued its first ever advisory warning of an increased risk of a megaquake. It created a bit of alarm.
This was not earthquake prediction, but many people thought the earthquake prediction information was released by the government. And many people went out to buy water, bottled water or some foods, and so a little confusion. But I can say that not very large panic happened. No.
Like Indonesia, Japan is also in a megathrust zone. One fault line is the Nankai Trough, an 800-kilometer-long undersea trench formed at the subduction zone between the Philippine Sea and Eurasian tectonic plates. A Nankai Trough quake has occurred every 100 to 150 years. The last confirmed quakes linked to it were the 1944 Tonankai and 1946 Nankai earthquakes. Experts say it's highly likely a quake with a magnitude of 8 or 9 will occur here within the next 30 years.
Magnitude 9.0 earthquake happened, the area of very strong ground motion or very high tsunami coming area is very huge, maybe 500 kilometer wide area. And there are many people living there. The Japanese government estimated 300,000 people who may be killed by this earthquake. This is a huge damages.
Japan is particularly vulnerable to seismic activity. A tremor occurs in Japan once every 5 minutes. Each year, up to 2,000 quakes are powerful enough to be felt by the people.
今までの人生で何回地震を経験しましたか？
小さいものも含めると数えきれないほどあります。
じゃあ日本は常に天災に備えていると思いますか？
そうですね。なんか水ですとか、非常用のトイレですとか、そういったものは準備しております。
いや、そんなことないと思います。結構東日本大震災が起きたあたりはすごいそういうのを意識して動いてたとは思うんですけど、大きな地震からもう10年以上経って、やっぱり若干平和ボケじゃないけど落ち着いてきちゃってるのかなっていうのはあると思います。
やっぱり常になんか町内会とかいろんな教会で震災の訓練はやってます。
In this broad area, there are many earthquakes that occur in and around Japan area. So probably the most famous, one of the most famous earthquake they experienced was the 1923 Kanto earthquake.
The Great Kanto quake struck on September the 1st. It had a magnitude of 7.9 and killed nearly 143,000 people in the Tokyo area. It caused a firestorm that destroyed 40% of Tokyo. A more recent major disaster happened in March 2011, known as the Tohoku earthquake. The quake and tsunami killed around 18,000 people, cut power lines, and flooded backup generators at Fukushima Daiichi, sending 3 reactors into meltdown. The area's 4-meter breakwater walls were overpowered by the waves.
In the past, or before the Fukushima event or the Tohoku earthquake, there was an underestimation of the possibility to have a big tsunami hitting this coastal area because we don't have sufficient scientific data. So that is one of the reasons that the tsunami wall was not sufficiently built. And the tsunami is actually higher than the wall that was built to protect the nuclear power plant. So I think that's one of the lessons that we have learned from the scientific point of view, that we should have more comprehensive data set to better understand what is the capacity of, say, this part of the subduction zone in terms of producing a very big earthquake that can trigger big tsunami waves.
Japan has taken a number of measures to deal with disasters, especially on building codes. When an earthquake up to a magnitude 7 strikes, a building should only sustain minor damage but function as usual. Buildings need to be reinforced with steel and concrete. Wooden buildings must have thicker beams.
Building code has been improved after 1923 Great Kanto earthquake areas. At that time, in old days, we do not have any earthquake-proof building code. But now we have a building code, and the building code has been improved several times. The last one is 2000 building code is the current code, and this is strong enough to not completely destroyed by even a large earthquake happen.
Tokyo resident Katsuko Nukui runs Raku Raku House, a community center that provides a cheap dinner, 200 yen, or $1.33 for adults and 100 yen for children.
このお家は60年前に建てられたお家で、外見はそのままになっています。駅に近いということと、子どもさんたちが皆さん一人で来られるということが最大の良かったことだと思っております。で、中で廊下もありまして、一生懸命子どもたちが騒いでおりますけども、ご近所のご理解もありまして、そういうことに対しても子どもさんのやることだからということで理解していただいて、毎回楽しくやっております。
The 82-year-old woman bought the house 3 years ago. The house also serves as an earthquake shelter for the neighborhood.
この木造の耐震をやる方があって、それで無料でやってくださるということで、渡りに船だと思ってお願いしました。
The shelter's sturdy beams are designed to withstand an earthquake. The ceiling has also been reinforced.
これ60年前からのこの建具を使ってますし、この耐震のことで支えられているので、心配なくここが使えているというふうに思います。
According to Tokyo University, 87% of new buildings in Tokyo are earthquake-proof. After the Palu earthquake in 2018, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, on request from the Indonesian government, shared Japan's expertise on disaster-resilient reconstruction. Japan has also shared their knowledge on early warning systems.
Equipment kita nggak sebagus Jepang, equipment kita sedensitinya tidak sebagus Jepang. So what we BNPB try to say to the community, teknologi good, teknologi very important. Tapi in case of saving life, kita juga harus melihat kondisi alam. Jadi whatever it is, Anda merasakan goyangan exceeding 30 seconds, you go away.
Earthquake-resistant buildings have also caught on in Indonesia. In Jakarta, the Menara Astra Tower was designed with what is called a belt truss system, which reduces vibration and tension in the building's columns in the event of a quake.
Kemudian juga ada peraturan pemerintah yang memang menyebutkan bahwa semua bangunan gedung, meskipun dia hanya bangunan rumah tinggal satu lantai, itu harus tahan gempa.
Indonesia has had seismic building codes since the 70s, based on Japanese standards. But it was only in 2002 that a national building law was passed. A national standard on seismic design was published in Indonesia in 2012. Codes are more stringent for buildings 8 stories or taller.
Pada saat tahap desain itu sudah ada tim sidang ya yang menyatakan bahwa desain bangunan ini layak dibangun, tidak hanya masalah gempa gitu. Jadi juga masalah yang lain.
The sprawling city of Jakarta is home to 10 million people. While it does not sit directly atop any fault lines, the problem is the loose foundations it's built on.
Jakarta sendiri tidak ada sumber gempa aktif di bawahnya Jakarta. Kalau gempanya misalkan di Selat Sunda ya, kita potensi ada megatrust di sana, ada potensi nanti 8, sekian. Jakarta akan lumayan goncangannya akan tinggi karena Jakarta itu daerahnya sedimen, Pak. Sedimen tebal Jakarta itu. Jadi kan makin ke utara makin pantai ya, jadi kan sedimennya makin tebal.
In November 2022, a 5.6 magnitude earthquake shook Cianjur in West Java, killing more than 600 people. The quake was felt in Jakarta, more than 100 kilometers from the epicenter. Buildings swayed violently in the capital, forcing people to rush out of their homes and offices.
We do have the historical record of the damaging earthquake in Jakarta at least 3 times. And the good news is the government of Jakarta now starting to do the earthquake resistant building audit. So in Jakarta, the building higher than 8th floor is already being assisted by the Ministry of Housing. And we expect that we will have the result by the end of this year or at least by next year. It takes 18 years for Japan to retrofit the non-earthquake resistant building to ensure that their safety to the next earthquake. In Jakarta, I hope no need to have 18 years, of course.
So though Indonesia has updated its seismic building codes, retrofitting buildings across the archipelago to these standards will take significant time and investment.
Kalau di Jakarta sendiri sebetulnya sudah jauh lebih tertata ya dibandingkan tahun-tahun sebelumnya. Jauh lebih tertatanya itu seperti apa? Karena sekarang Jakarta sendiri itu sudah ada rencana detail tata ruang yang sudah diperbarui.
So I'm studying earthquakes and tectonics in Indonesia a lot. I can see things has been improving a lot through the years, right? So I think things are developing in the right direction, which is what has been done in Japan already. I would foresee that things will become even better as we move on to the future.
Students in this high school in West Jakarta are participating in an earthquake drill. It might look like fun, but the purpose is deadly serious. The evacuation program is supported by 2 government institutions dealing with disasters, as well as the Japanese government that sent researchers to assess the school.
Kedepannya dari pihak Jepang setelah melakukan evaluasi dan penilaian di SMA Negeri 57 akan ada earthquake warning early system. Kalau berdasarkan penjelasan itu 10 detik sebelum gempa itu datang ke lokasi SMA Negeri 57, alarm itu akan berbunyi. Oke, jadi ada waktu 10 detik untuk kita mempersiapkan untuk penanggulangan gempa tersebut.
Since 2011's Tohoku quake, earthquake drills are now compulsory in all of Japan's elementary and high schools.
Kalau kita mau belajar dari Jepang sebetulnya, mereka sangat sering mengadakan simulasi kebencanaan gitu. Jadi kalau di Jepang, anak-anak kecil pun mereka sudah tahu ketika ada bencana mereka harus ngapain. Sementara di Indonesia, di Jakarta itu jarang sekali. Di beberapa tempat memang sudah ada gitu.
Around 243 schools in Jakarta have launched earthquake drills. A tiny fraction, as there are more than 8,000 schools in the city. But it is a good start.
Untuk dari guru-guru dan warga sekolah sangat antusias karena ini merupakan hal baru yang kami lakukan di SMA Negeri 57 atas kesadaran ini dan juga menjadi pengalaman baru untuk peserta didik yang akan juga dibagikan kepada lingkungan di rumahnya.
Another legacy of the 2004 earthquake and tsunami is in disaster relief. Immediately after the catastrophe 20 years ago, the lack of supplies and equipment hampered rescue. In 2007, Indonesia passed a new law on disaster management to improve coordination and management. The National Disaster Management Agency was established the year after.
Kita meng-SOP-kan, standar operasional prosedurkan bahwa ketika terjadi bencana dimanapun itu di Indonesia, itu personil BNPB lengkap dengan logistik awal, apapun kondisinya, itu sudah ada di daerah bencana dalam 12 jam. pada saat darurat bencana ini, BNPB diberikan kemudahan akses untuk anggaran. Jadi kita memiliki dana on call. Kalau untuk dana siap pakai, itu sebenarnya untuk batas atasnya itu tidak ada ya. Kalau misalkan dana tanggap darurat, itu ada di dana siap pakai. Yang ini juga berbeda-beda tergantung kejadian bencana pada tahun itu.
It's now December in Jakarta. BMKG's Megathrust alert nearly 4 months ago came and went. While nothing eventful came out of it, the threat is nonetheless ever present.
One of the most basic truths is if something happened before in the past, we know it can happen again. We know that earthquakes and tsunamis, like what happened in 2004, hit the Mentawai section of the megathrust, hit Padang in the year 1797 and again in 1833. And what happened in 1797 happens about every 220 years on average, at least over the past 700 years. And so it's been a little more than 220 years since the last time it happened. And so if it happened in the past, we know it can happen in the future. And we should always be prepared for something like that.
And should that time come, how prepared is Indonesia for the next big one? Can a repeat of the devastating human and material toll of 2004 be avoided?
Anywhere in the world, unless they are continually working to make sure they remain prepared, they're not going to be prepared. So it's not a state of being, it's a direction. So the question shouldn't be, are we prepared right now, but what are we doing to ensure that we remain prepared years and decades into the future?
So I think on the top of minds of Indonesian people right now are still about economy rather than, for example, disaster preparedness. Sometimes like up to now, we still see like the treatment from the government treating disaster preparedness as cost. Because they think that disasters, the big disasters, do not take place on a daily basis. Therefore, kind of like wasting money to some extent for them compared to other priorities. So yeah, this kind of vicious cycle needs to be fixed. There is also kind of like this incentive when talking about like disaster. For example, some local governments are very hesitant to talk about disaster in their area because there will be discouraging to gather more investment coming to like their own province or like regencies or cities. So yeah, there's also another side of the perspective.
2 decades after the tragedy that shook the world, Indonesia has taken a number of measures to protect its people. In Banda Aceh, the memory of the 2004 tsunami is manifest. Evacuation signs and centres are visible. The same goes for Padang, where several government buildings and hotels have been chosen as evacuation centres if the city were to be struck by a tsunami. New mangroves line the shores, with over 30 million trees having been planted in Aceh and North Sumatra. Mangroves act as a natural barrier to waves.
Now they are trying to make sure that we have the sea dike at the coastal area and also some mangrove and coastal vegetation. If the tsunami still crossing this first protection, they make elevated route with a height of 4 meters and the distance of 1.5 kilometers from the coastal area. Our job is how to make the tsunami inundation become lower. Even if tsunami inundated this area, the damaging force into infrastructures is lower. So that's the idea of having multiple protection.
Dari indikasi persiapan-persiapan dan pengalaman yang bisa saya lihat di Aceh, kalau misal Allah berkehendak bahwa itu akan terjadi, kita pasti tidak siap. Saya berani jamin itu. Tapi kan kita nggak bisa berhenti di situ saja, bahwa informasi-informasi yang disampaikan kepada masyarakat bukan hanya bisa memunculkan kekhawatiran, ketakutan, dan mungkin momok bagi masyarakat. Harusnya kelembagaan-kelembagaan yang tupoksinya itu bisa menyampaikan informasi yang lebih cerdas, lebih kreatif.
Kayak sirine itu biasanya itu kan disimulasikan setahun sekali. Setahun sekali memperingati 20 misalnya nanti memperingati tsunami di Desember biasanya. Itu mereka bikin edukasi sama simulasi biasanya gitu. Kalau menurut pribadi Aulia itu sangat-sangat kurang kalau misalnya dibikin setahun sekali. Karena jarak setahun itu agak jauh dan harusnya memang edukasi bencana itu harus sudah masuk ke dalam pelajarannya sekolah-sekolah.
Nah sekarang insya Allah dengan capaian-capaian apa yang telah dilakukan oleh BMKG dengan bertambahnya jumlah sensor yang makin rapat, terus dengan sistem yang ada sistem backup dan lain-lain, kita belajar dari tsunami 2004, insya Allah kita alat-alat kita sudah siap.